mistake. You don't fire somebody over a mistake like that. It happens.
But if the Trump folks had simply said she is not a political speechwriter, she was trying to do the kind of speeches Melania typically does, even though she's not a public person in that same way as her husband. Something that make it gloss over, so she's not a professional politician. But they even failed that test.
I don't think it mattered who did it. I think it mattered that they owned up to the fact that a person made a mistake. It could have been a professional speechwriter. It was somebody working hand in hand with Melania Trump. It wasn't a particularly normal political speech. The writer was a person who worked in the Trump organization and helped him write a couple of his books. So, a known person, known to the family.
When you say helped, you should use air quotes. The helped.
Well, I don't know.
This is radio.
Presumably, yeah, right. I mean, my only point is it's a person who's been working for the Trump organization for years, professional writer, assigned to help Mrs. Trump. Probably they knew each other and had a good rapport, and just screwed this up, and there was no system in place to electronically check the text against databases. Every college in America now that I'm aware of subjects term papers submitted by students. They're all submitted electronically so that they can be entered into this computer software that looks for matching words and phrases to show plagiarism. So students are on the alert. Watch out! Don't just lift the stuff. You got to change. You got to change some words. I don't know what the algorithm is. You can't have more than 3 words, 4 words, 5 words that show up, or somebody's going to go look and do a comparison. So be careful, students. I mean, this stuff is not rocket science. This is pretty standard, available, free as far or cheap over the internet software. Sophisticated campaigns just do this automatically. I mean, they could have had 10 people read that speech and no one would have thought, wait, didn't Mrs. Obama say these exact words? Nobody would know that. You need to do that electronically. They didn't do it. They didn't have a system in place. That speaks to the question of not having a varsity operation yet.
Well, that's
but they denied it. So it gave it life and it lingered.
Yeah, and the Democrats were a little too smug to realize how damaging the chairman could be, and when it happened, I think they handled it better. They didn't make a 3-day story out of it, but it was awkward, embarrassing, and so both parties started off with varying degrees of goofs that shouldn't have happened.
So awkward and embarrassing when Debbie Wasserman Schultz addressed the Florida delegation at the DNC. She was booed off stage by her home state
on Monday morning before the convention started.
Right. That was the handwriting on the wall suggesting that the initial departure strategy was not going to be acceptable.
But by that time, there was no really graceful way they could have got out. It was too late to fire her, which they ultimately had to do one way or another.
Right.
But I will say this.
But it was embarrassing, and it didn't have to be if they'd taken care of it much earlier.
I will say this. Showing the difference in styles, when Donna Brazile was named interim chair, I believe, of both the party and the convention. Actually, she's not the interim chair of the convention. I forgot who the interim chair of the convention is.
The Baltimore mayor. Well, the Baltimore mayor opened things. She's a vice chair. Donna Brazile is a vice chair, and there's 1 or 2 other vice chairs. I'm not sure.
I think Congresswoman Fudge is the official chairwoman of the convention now.
Okay,
but
I have no reason to dispute that at all because I just don't know.
Donna Brazile on the executive board of the DNC, within 5 hours of her being named interim chair with Debbie Wasserman Schultz's departure, they immediately and gratuitously apologized to Bernie Sanders for the hurtful and offensive things that were said, and then beyond that, it began to turn the story. It's kind of it was remarkable to me how quickly, and then I believe it was within 15 minutes, both the White House and Secretary Clinton's press office both released statements suggesting a level of coordination we have yet to see in this election cycle as far as managing message.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of things there. One, that's all fine and good to say, gee, sorry. But if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter, truly disappointed in the outcome and feeling negative towards Hillary Clinton in the beginning, their outrage was fed. Now, they had a few outlets for that over the course of the day. The Schultz meeting, Bernie had a meeting earlier in the day, and then and Bernie could say, chill out, folks, send out a text, we need to beat this guy, she needs to win, that we need to beat this guy Trump. But there's still an enormous amount of anger, and this feeds that anger. So even though they apologize, the damage is done, and there are plenty of people who, like Bernie, who will say, yeah, they're sorry, but they got what they wanted. Those thieving jerks, lying cheats. But the thing that amused me, did you want to add something there, Alan?
Except they didn't say that. The thing here, I think, is that they didn't allow it to become a 3-day problem for them.
Well, no, they got Debbie out of there.
Exactly.
She was, and I'm just waiting for this chief financial officer who wrote this one particularly offensive email for him to go. I think he's down in his foxhole right now, and all the fire is up above ground, and he's hoping people forget about him. I don't think they will, because he wrote it, and it was pretty offensive. And he may be a rock star in his job at the DNC, but it's hard to see that when you write something, when you're a senior guy, you write something like that you can get a pass. The thing that amused me,
that's kind of inside baseball for the American public. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not jettisoned.
We'll see. I mean, Debbie Wasserman Schultz takes the fall for that and other emails. What amused me,
I think that's understating. I mean, I've said this on the show multiple times. She had one job as chairwoman, was to at least give the appearance of playing it fair. I mean, it's politics, and therefore everyone has a bias. But I think she failed on simply giving the appearance of playing it fair. I mean, working on presidential campaigns multiple times in 2004, while I didn't work in the primaries, working in the general, and friends of mine who had worked in the primaries, every other campaign hated Howard Dean, just hated it. But they still offered the rules up, and the other campaigns coordinated, and they weren't quite certain who was going to take the throne once Howard Dean was knocked off. But the campaigns coordinated in Iowa to just hammer Howard Dean. Most notably, your former colleague, Congressman Gephardt, spent an enormous sum of money just destroying him in Iowa. But that was a candidate versus the committee versus a candidate.
No, I recognize that when there's a perception of unfairness, and the guy, if you're a Bernie supporter, the guy you love says the system's rigged, but everybody's just kind of rolling along, and then all of a sudden, the weekend before the convention, these emails come out that show this clear bias inside the system by senior staff. It fed the narrative, it fed people's opinion, and just outraged them. They got rid of her. No way could she survive. They apologized. But the other thing they did, and we haven't talked about this yet, is they then said, well, we think the Russians did this, and because there's this bromance between Trump and Putin wants Trump, so that's what affected the timing. And I thought to myself,
that is the perfect segue. We're going to take our first break and come back. Whether or not Putin wants Trump to be president of the United States, or is that just National Enquirer, or is that actual news? But more when we come back.
feeling very left out.
And we are back. So the Russians and the former whatever the current Russian security agency has been in the news as well, including how they've juiced the Olympics, and we might get to that in international relations. And I use the phrase "juiced" deliberately. But that said, the Russians have been in the news as far as the same email scandal. It's alleged at the moment, and the FBI is actually getting involved, that this email breach that we're talking about was actually done from Russia. So, Alan Moore, how credible is this? Is this a National Enquirer kind of story, or is Putin trying to put his thumb on the scale for the American election?
Well, so there's two questions that you have to separate. Who hacked? It sounds like the Russians hacked, and maybe two separate and independent Russian groups, which is a reminder that there are people out there all the time trying to hack into our system, into our systems, into different U.S. government agencies, political entities, and so on. So let's assume that it's correct that one or two or both Russian technology expert enterprises, presumably in their